Before we start discussing the main focus of this iClone6 tutorial, we need to set our scene or stage properly. This is a very important step, and it directly relates to the way we use cameras. When setting up our scene, the first thing we need to consider is what aspect ratio we'll be delivering our project in. iClone has two default projects that cater for a standard 4:3 aspect ratio, and also one that is a widescreen 16:9 format, suitable for HD or high definition television. If I go to the project template library, I can select this widescreen default project. So under Template, Default, Empty Wide, I can select this and apply it to the view. And now we can see our viewport has changed to an aspect ratio, a widescreen one of 16:9. These are two default projects that come with iClone to get you up and started. I can return us to the 4:3 aspect ratio project by selecting this empty stage, and I can also do this by double clicking on the thumbnail. And now we're back to our 4:3 aspect ratio default project. You can of course choose from a range of predetermined ratios, as well as create your own custom ones as well. To understand why it is important to make this decision now before we start our camera work, I'm going to load an example project to illustrate the issue. In the Custom Projects IC6 Camerwork folder, I have a project called Stage Setting. I'm going to load that up. We can see some basic action here of Mason and Heidi. Now I'm not too worried about this overall motion because I'm just going to show you how we're going to work with cameras. So we have a two-shot here, and what I want to do is I've already set up a couple of cameras for two other angles that I wish to cut to. And I can select those simply by coming up to the camera menu at the top, and I have a camera A and a camera B. If I select camera A, this is my two-shot of Mason and Heidi. And this is fine because we can use this as our establishing camera. And as you can see, we've got Mason talking to Heidi. It's nicely framed in this 4:3 area, reasonably tight on the right hand side. And the other camera I've got is B camera, so let's switch to that and look at that. B camera is directly on Heidi, so for example, she's talking, looking at Mason here, and then turns to camera. So these are basically our two camera setups that we want. They're lock-offs. And again, they're 4:3. But what happens if I now decide that my output is not 4:3, but is going to be widescreen 16:9 HD? When I open the render panel and select the format I want, and here as you can see we have full frame 800 by 600. That is a 4:3 aspect ratio. I'm now going to select HD. So we've got a number of options here, but I'm going to use the 1280-720. The aspect ratio for these will be the same, 16:9. As soon as I do this, you can see that the framing has completely changed. iClone has kept the kind of distance at the top and the bottom of frame, but we now have a much wider scene caused by the fact that we're effectively cropping and losing parts of the image. Let's have a look at A camera. So we'll go back to A camera. And the same thing's occurred here. The shot isn't as elegant, it no longer works because it's kept the distance here at the top and the bottom, but unfortunately it's now made the shot so much wider that we're seeing significantly off the left and the right of the scene. It doesn't look as nice. And what we're going to have to do to fix this with this camera selected is we're now going to have to either reframe or change our focal length. Now I could just change the focal length and zoom in a bit, or I could even dolly the camera in physically. If we were on a real set, then I could dolly in. And the basic idea is what I'm doing now using these controls is I'm reframing my shot to make it nicer for this 16:9 widescreen format. And again, I will then have to go to camera B, which isn't working. It's a bit better, but it's still not working well. And also I'm going to have to come in here and do a bit of reframing to kind of get the type of shot that I want, because I've now changed my aspect ratio. Now, This may not seem like a big deal, but if you have hundreds of shots or multi-camera setups that you've already created, then potentially you've just created a lot of extra work for yourself. So remember, before you start working with your camera in a scene, make sure that you set the output format for the project first so that you're working with the correct aspect ratio from day one. This is very important.